Thank you, and I guess I don't have to stay the night tonight now. Appreciate it. So, all right. Well, good morning, or good afternoon, I guess, members of the commission and Secretary Hepler. I've got a quick update here about 12 slides, just a little bit of a review of our last season's upland game hunting. I just want to start out with a little bit of a review on our pheasants as far as our hunter numbers and our harvest. Last year we had about 63,000 resident hunters, which was a nice little increase from 2013. If you remember back to 2013, it was a kind of a year where our pheasant numbers kind of hit a low point, at least for our CRP era here in the last 20 years, and our hunter numbers really dropped off. So you can see our hunter numbers did rebound a little bit from 2013, but we're still below that 2012 level by a fair amount. Also, as expected, our pheasant harvest did increase a little bit last year for our residents. Harvest of about 525,000 roosters. A nice little increase from 370,000 the year before, but still quite a bit below that 2012 level, the kind of the year before we plummeted quite a bit in 2013. Our birds per hunter also increased to almost 9 birds per person. That's up from about 7 the year before. So all good news there. And similar for our non-residents, we had about close to 80,000 hunters, which is an increase of about 4,000 from 2013, but still quite a bit below 2012. Back in 2012, almost 94,000 hunters, so kind of still below that 2012 level by a fair amount. The harvest, as expected, increased to a little over 700,000 birds. It's up from about 575,000 the previous year. And again, still below that 2012 level where we were shooting well over 800,000 roosters by non-residents alone. The birds per hunter, similar to the residents, increased as well. So if we kind of look at the big picture here and kind of look at just the CRP era here, this is just a graph from 1986 looking at our hunter numbers. Back in the mid-2000s, really when our pheasant numbers hit historic highs, we had well over 170,000 hunters between residents and non-residents. This past year, right at about 145,000 hunters, which is pretty similar to where we were back in the year 2000. So it's kind of a good perspective there. If we look at our overall harvest estimate this past year, we were at about 1.25 million birds when we add up the residents and non-residents. It's nice to see us back above 1 million. Back in 2013 was the first time we were below 1 million birds as far as a harvest since about 1997. That was kind of the year where we had a really bad blizzard and we dipped below 1 million birds. So it's nice to see that we're back up above 1 million birds again. Kind of look at the perspective though, we have seen this kind of a downward trend since 2007. If you remember back to 2007, that was kind of the time period where our CRP acres peaked. We were at about 1.5 million acres of CRP grassland back in 2007. Right now we are at, I think, around 970,000. So we've lost about a third of our CRP acres during this time period, so it's not surprising that our bird numbers have followed suit. We've also seen some harsh winters in there. As you remember, 2010, 11, and 12 are all well above normal for snow cover. Typically results in lower overwinter survival of our pheasants, and our population probably declined in response to that as well. I think we all remember kind of what happened in 2013 when we kind of hopefully hit rock bottom. We had a very cold and wet spring followed by one of the hardest or most severe droughts we've ever seen in late summer and early fall, and the results were pretty bad there as far as our harvest estimate there. But as you can see, in 2014, we see a nice little increase back to 1.25 million birds. Another population estimate that we have here is the preseason population estimate. This is a kind of an independent set of data we use to track our pheasant population. What goes into this is basically our harvest information and our sex ratio before the hunting season and sex ratio after the hunting season for our birds. So we have 3 sets of data that go into this. And as you can see, the population estimate has also kind of reached historic highs in 2007 with about 12 million pheasants in South Dakota. Pretty incredible. If we look back to 2013, we were at almost half that, so it was a pretty big decline. This past year, we were at a little over 7 million, so nice little rebound there. If we kind of compare that population estimate to our other main survey indice we have for pheasants, which is our August roadside survey, kind of our preseason survey that we kind of put out for the public to kind of see what to expect for the hunting season. You can see it tracks pretty well over the years. Again, these bars are just the population estimate, which we determine after the hunting season, and this kind of orangish red line is our August roadside survey results. So as you can see, most years it tracks pretty well. As you can see, the last couple of years it maybe didn't track quite as well, and some of that could be due to our kind of mild winters. And one set of data that we put into this is our winter sex ratio of pheasants, and we really need good snow cover to collect that data. Over the last couple of years, we haven't had a lot of snow cover, so it limits the amount of data we have, and it could also skew some of that data towards roosters, which would inflate this number a little bit. If you kind of look at this a different way, this is just kind of show you how well those two different survey indices correlate. Again, this is just the pheasants per mile from the roadside survey, and this is our population estimate. And overall, they correlate pretty well. They do a pretty good job of predicting. When we collect that data in August, it tells us a pretty good indication of what our population is. This red dot here is, again, from the past year, so it doesn't fit the trend quite as good as past years, but like I said, that could be due to some of the limited survey conditions that we had. I just want to finish up with pheasants here by kind of giving you a perspective back to the last 60 years or so. As we know, I've talked about earlier, and Tommy alluded to it, and how important habitat is to most of our game, especially our upland game. This graph just shows the response of our pheasant population to the CRP acres on the landscape, or back in the 1950s and 60s, it would have been the soil bank program. So all these green bars are just showing how many acres of perennial grassland cover were on the landscape through a farm program. As you can see, our pheasant population responded really strongly during the soil bank era. Again, after the Farm Bill of 1985, when we put CRP on the ground, our pheasant population responded quite strongly. Unfortunately, we've been losing CRP acres, and our pheasant population has been following suit, which is not very unexpected if you can see what happened back when the soil bank habitat left the landscape. Just want to switch gears here a little bit and talk a little bit about prairie grouse. Obviously not near as high profile of a species as our pheasants, and not near the hunter effort, but again, a pretty important game bird here in South Dakota. We have about, last year we had about 7,000 resident hunters, about 4,500 non-resident hunters, with a total harvest of about 40,000 prairie grouse. Again, this is going to be almost all sharp-tailed grouse and greater prairie chickens. I think the previous year harvest was about 25,000, so we saw a nice bump in the prairie grouse harvest from the previous year as well, which is nice to see. If we kind of see the big picture on prairie grouse, as you can see, our hunters and harvests have been declining pretty steadily in our prairie grouse over the last 25 to 30 years. I think there's a couple of reasons for that. Back in about the 1985 to 1990 period is when pheasant populations started increasing again with the CRP in the landscape. And a lot of people maybe switched gears and started hunting pheasants a little bit more aggressively compared to prairie grouse. So that could be part of the reason we've seen this tailing off kind of during the CRP era. But also there's been a lot of loss of non-CRP grassland for the last 40 to 50 years, and that could also be contributing to a reduction in our prairie grouse population. With that, I'll just share a couple pictures of some youth that we took out this past year, and they were able to shoot a rooster, and they're pretty happy there, and hopefully this tradition carries on.
Great. Questions for Travis? I had one quick one. In regards to the length of the season, one of the questions we get always is some people want to extend that season with the idea in mind that we're really harvesting roosters so we don't really hurt the hens. That some landowners are opposed to that. And then the other issue is extending the season. Is it detrimental? Would it be detrimental to the overall pheasant population? So if you could just kind of quickly run through that for some of the folks on the commission that haven't been through that discussion, but will be pretty quick. So
sure. I guess from a scientific standpoint, we really don't have any data to suggest that having a longer or shorter season would have any substantial impact on your overall pheasant population in the long run. There is a possibility, I don't think it's ever been documented through a study, that harvesting more roosters might increase the overwinter survival of hens because you have fewer birds out there to use the available habitat. And that seems to make sense, and that could be a possibility that actually occurs, but I'm not aware of any scientific study that's ever documented an increase in hen survival because you harvested more roosters. So I guess
And that made me realize too that I had a landowner ask me that in my area. They think when the snow starts that it's hard on the pheasants to have the hunting.
yeah, and that's another mechanism I don't think that's ever been looked at. If maybe flushing those birds during harsh winter and pushing those birds out of good winter cover might have some impact. And I don't, to my knowledge, there's not a study that specifically looked at that either.
Concern to them.
Any other concerns or questions? Keeping in mind that we basically will lock in the pheasant season along with our actions in regards to the proposals if we finalize. So if somebody asks you that question, then pretty much we've had those debates at different times over the course of the years. And if you were going to pick a common medium in the middle, that's pretty much what we've done in regards to pheasant. Still provide the opportunity, but we haven't got any data that indicates that we're over harvesting or hurting the hen pheasant population, et cetera. So for 3 years, we'll be at that. Go ahead, Tom.
Might just add one thing to that whole conversation. A couple of years ago when we were talking about the pheasant season, a couple of key elements to remember again about the pheasant season is that it is a season for roosters only because we have the ability to distinguish the males from females, and so you don't have that higher level of harvest on the female portion of it. And in many years when we do have the conditions for winter sex ratios, when we do those rooster to hen ratios, there are ample roosters out there from the reproductive standpoint coming into the spring. So the season is not having any impact on the population itself. And if you remember back even farther when we had a couple of other pheasant units in particular in western South Dakota that were a short duration, a couple of weeks in fact, and we had that long discussion about combining it all into the long season. One of the best pieces of information that existed out there was a study done in Iowa and Minnesota concurrently over a 25-year time period, where you had one state had a very short season and another state had a very lengthy season, and over those same environmental conditions, and those populations trended right with each other. So really what it indicated, whether it was a short season or long season, it didn't have an overall impact on the population because they followed the same trend. The real key, as we all talked about, was the habitat side of it again, and the environmental conditions that we can't control when those do occur.
Okay.
Yeah, I think on average we harvest about 50% of our roosters. We look at our winter sex ratio data and take those estimates.
And a great deal of those are harvested within the first 3 weeks of the season. Yeah. Go ahead, Kath. You have any?
Your report is great, and it's good to see that with some better weather conditions, to see that things are bouncing back a little bit, and hopes that can continue to, along with working on habitat.
Yeah, I think we're in pretty good shape. Obviously, with open winter, that's always the first step to seeing a population increase. And we rarely run into moisture problems this early in the year, but we could sure use a shot of rain to get those cool season grasses for the nesting conditions in better shape. But pretty optimistic we'll be all right.
Great. Thanks, Travis. Well done. Tony or Tom, if you guys want to pick another one of the information items out that we might be able to get through in, say, 10 or 12 minutes, would you have something you'd like to do that?